You are listening to Eastman's Flycast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Yo, what's happening, guys? I got a brand new Eastman's Flycast for you. So this week I have on Culley and Clay from Skyblasters Outdoors. These are two young men that grew up here in the Madison Valley, and they just absolutely love to fly fish, to hunt, to enjoy all Montana has to offer. They're knowledgeable well beyond their years, as they have really valuable insight into fly fishing these different rivers and what works. And it's just a great perspective and a great conversation with these two guys. So I'm really glad I met them. I still need to get out fishing with these guys. In fact, maybe I'll shoot them a message as the big bugs are still up high. But just two great guys, and they're great on the podcast. We'll get right into it. I just want to thank a couple sponsors. I want to thank Eastmans and everything they do for this podcast. So make sure to check out everything we have going on. Check out our magazines, Eastman's Hunting Journal, Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal. Check out my other podcast, a hunting-specific podcast, Eastman's Elevated. We have a great episode this week with my buddy Tyler Boschma coming on. Talks all about going for it or all in on these hunts and these adventures. And then we talk about his upcoming sheep hunt, and just a great conversation. So it's a great podcast. Make sure to check that out. And check out our Beyond the Grid internet TV show. And also check out Eastman's Hunting Journals on the Outdoor Channel. So I really appreciate the support from Eastman's on this podcast, and it's been this great endeavor I've really enjoyed doing. So I've got some great episodes coming up for you guys, and just these good next level conversations. I had Dylan Ness. He came back down and fished with me for a couple days. We got into the salmon fly hatch and just had a barrel of laughs, and had a great time. And I always pick up stuff from talking to these guys. I have him on the podcast again, so he's got another episode coming up. And then I gain knowledge just with fishing with these guys, and it's so fun to fish with somebody that's really good on the rod and really good on the oars. We got after it there for a couple days, but also just pick up tips and tidbits. I did this thing with the streamer where he throws it out there and then mends downstream, and then that streamer would swim like down the run or down the seam. It's so impressive just to watch, and I hadn't seen that tactic before. So I'm picking up things all the time. Really enjoy doing this podcast. Thanks a bunch, you guys, for the support. It helps so much, the iTunes reviews, and it helps getting this podcast out so people can hear about it and hopefully listen in and enjoy it. Also help the shares really help on Instagram and Facebook if you like an episode. So yeah, just appreciate it, guys. We're going to try to make this podcast go, and it's because of you guys listening in. So thanks a bunch. Let's get right into this thing. So this is Culley and Clay. They're from Skyblasters Outdoors. You can find them on all social media there. Great couple guys. Eastman's Flycast, and I'm your host, Brian Barney. Here we go. Okay, I've got Clay and Culley here. They came out to the house. So these are two young guys that I'm just meeting for the first time, but I started following your guys' social media and Skyblasters, right?
Yes.
Yep. And so I started following your guys' social media, and I thought, boy, I recognize that river. I recognize that peak up there. And I thought, oh, they're Ennis boys. I can't believe. And so you guys have built this huge social media following, and you guys are just two young guys living in Ennis, Montana, right?
Yep, pretty much, yeah.
Fishing and hunting like madmen?
Yeah. Most of the time, yeah. As much as we can.
Yeah. Well, those responsibilities get in the way of good fishing, don't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they do. It seems like the best day to go fishing is the day you got to work, so.
Boy, that's the truth. But
yep.
Yeah, you guys have built this huge following relatively quickly, and just cataloging, a lot of your guys' adventures. And I think it's so cool to see like the next generation come up and be fishing and hunting like crazy out there in the elements, and you guys hit it really hard.
Yeah, totally. There's not a lot of kids who go out, and fish like when it's blowing sideways and it's snowing, but we're out there, even if the fishing's terrible. So, but
half the time, I'm not as busy as Culley, but half the time I don't have anything to do. I'm just sitting around. So it's like, well, I'm just gonna go fish or do something.
You never regret it, do you? Like going out fishing and being young and having that much energy, you don't really get worn out. Like when
do
it's
some crazy
evening
stuff.
time, like you're just ready to go fishing. But I never regret going out. And like some weeks, I just don't make a habit of being out in the evenings. But every time I do, I never regret it. I could go for an hour and I feel better. It's like I had a little adventure before I come home.
No,
Oh, yeah.
totally. And there's those days that you go and it's terrible, like your hands are numb. You're like, why am I out here? But then you're like glad you went when you got back, and you don't know why. It still was terrible when you were out there, but it was still fun to go. You know what I mean?
It's that type
But-
2 fun,
Yeah.
right?
Those days make the best stories.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
exactly.
do. Well, and it's weird. You ride a roller coaster or something, and it's fun, but you don't go home and think about it. You don't think about going the next day. You know, it was like fun in the moment. But that type 2 fun is like being out enduring and, like you say, hands cold and the whole deal. But like the mind remembers the good points, like hooking into that nice brown trout and fighting him, and I landed that one, and we were laughing so hard, and it was great. You know,
Yeah.
and you come home, and then like the only thing you can think about is being back out on the water, on the mountains.
Totally. Like one day we went between Reynolds and Pine Butte with the raft, and it snowed June 2nd. It was terrible, but we thought it was the coolest thing ever. We were done. It was like, who gets to go float the river when it's snowing in June and catch like 2 giant fish? I mean, but nobody else was out there. So, but yeah.
Well, and a lot of catching fish, like the mood or your confidence or the way you feel. I know it's a little hippie, but it sure has to do with how many fish you catch, doesn't it?
That's the weirdest thing, but it's the truest thing. And I don't know what it is, but like if the morale in the boat is high, like you're catching fish. Doesn't even matter what kind of day it is. But once you start to get down or down on each other or whatever, lose your interest, you just won't catch anything. It's the weirdest thing, but
yeah, it's like you get up in the front of the boat and you're pouting or something. No, you're not gonna catch crap. So you just sit up there, you're like, it doesn't land right, it doesn't go right, you can't mend, you don't look ahead enough to find the spot. It's just terrible.
the rower starts getting lazy.
Yeah, or I get hungry. That's my problem. Seriously, I get hungry when I'm rowing, and the boat just starts to get floppy.
Start floating past my line, and I like turn around and Coley's like slamming a Snickers or something.
Totally.
Yeah,
but-
good vibes catch fish. Good rowers catch fish too.
Very
It's
good.
so important, isn't
Oh.
it? Clay, you're doing some guiding. You did last summer. How old are you guys?
So I'm 19. I'll be 20 this fall.
I'm 18. I'm pretty young for being a freshman in college, but
Okay. And you guys go to MSU, so you're
yeah.
not far away. Bozeman, right?
Yep.
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 Okay, way cool. And so you did some guiding last summer.
Yep. Yeah. So you got to be 18 to start. So last year was my first year, and yeah, just basically started out, and anybody that would take me that needed a last-minute trip or something, I was pretty much open. So I managed to get a fairly decent start for, around here. It's pretty busy, but
And then good outfitter too. Who are you working under?
tons of different people.
Whoever will give you trips.
Yeah, I work a lot for like Dirty Mike and Todd France and Rainbow Valley Lodge and those guys. Those are probably the main 3 that booked me, but they're pretty good to me.
Those are great guys.
Yeah.
Yep. I bet that experience, like those 20 days that you had last year, really helped going into this year. And it's got to be a little bit different when you're so focused on yourself and guiding. Like you've got a skill set that you've built, over the last handful of years where you get really good with a fly rod in your hands or you get really good behind the sticks. It's a little bit different when you put a beginner up front and go try to catch a fish again, isn't it?
It's pretty tough. It's a little easier if they're good listeners and willing to learn, but there's some tough days for sure. It's a whole different ball game.
How many times have you said mend?
Way too many. Half of them are like, "What's that mean again?" I'm like, all right, we'll figure it out.
Good for you. It's all about patience, and again, it's the right attitude. You're out
Yeah.
there to have fun, and they're fishing the Madison, and like the view too from the Madison. It's the best way to see those ranges out there, and
yeah.
it's just a good experience. So, like half the time, I think we put the pressure on ourselves. You could catch a couple trout, and most people are going to be pretty happy. And if they're not, they're probably not the guys you want to be guiding anyways.
Yeah, they're not there for the
Well,
right
most of the
reason.
guides are so hardcore that they think it's like, you got to catch this many fish a day, or you got to catch one like 20-inch fish. But most people don't care at all. They're just glad to be there, basically. So
Everybody's on their own journey, right?
Yeah.
And they're just happy to be there and seeing the mountains. And be nothing worse than like a high-stress guide, like me yelling at him the whole time in the front. Like, that isn't fun. Like, you want to give him tips and make him a better fly fisherman, but you want to give him a positive experience.
You just want to sit there and scream at him the whole time, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's really cool that you're guiding. That's got to be some good extra money for the summertime.
Yeah, it works out great. Do it between school, and it's an awesome way to pay for school and cut down on the loans, hopefully. But
yeah, right
awesome.
on.
Beats the heck out of mowing lawns anyways.
Mm-hmm. The only bad part is it cuts into your fishing time.
Yeah, it does. I don't get nearly as much time to fish, but it is pretty nice. Sometimes I'll just have a bomber day, and I'll call Culley and be like, hey, the fishing is really good. Then we need to go right now. And then we'll go that evening, but it cuts into it a little bit.
Yeah, I'll go in the evening, and he's so sunburned. It's like, dude, you're going to get skin cancer, man.
Yeah, I have learned to cover up. That sun is just brutal, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I look, so I do a pretty good job of covering up, but I look at my hands and I think they're 10 years older than I am just from that sun.
Jerky hands.
Yeah, just that sun beating down on them. Yep. Guys got to cover up for sure. But yeah, those evening drifts, those are the best. So yeah, I've got enough guide buddies around where I'll get that same phone call, like, it's on fire today. It's 8A plus 1, And it's like, okay, I'll be there, and then go fish it afterwards. And those big fish, they like to slide over and eat in the evening, don't they?
Yeah, they definitely come out later.
Like a good salmon fly day is cool in the daytime, but in the evening it's a different story if you know what you're doing.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and the guide boats get off the water. There's not as many guides down there. It feels like you have the river back. Like, I love the evenings.
Yeah.
And I can get in a full day of work and then get that evening, the best part of the day. And the morning can be good too. The first fly's down, but not quite like the evening when those bugs are really coming off and those fish are eating them, right?
Well, and you got to time it too. Like, you want to be in a certain section sometimes right at that evening, because you can be too early and you can be way too late too. Like, you can't see your flies sometime, and then that just defeats the purpose in general. But it's
going off sound.
Yeah, exactly.
So true. Like, trying to hit the right stretch of river during the right time.
Yeah,
and that goes for that. We talk middle of the day, but I like that 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock hatch when it really gets buzzy out. You can get some nice fish around that time too.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But just timing, it's timing which bank or which section you want to fish. It's also timing like the other boats too, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the boats are really weird because some days there's so many people on the water, and other days there isn't, but you don't want to pull out in front of this guy. Maybe you want to let everyone go ahead of you. But sometimes that doesn't work either because they catch everything ahead of you, basically. But you don't want to be that guy who's like, for lack of a better terms, just going out there in front of everybody,
Yep.
But,
Yeah, we, especially during hoppers last year, our hopper season last year was unreal, super good. And, I'd get some guide trips and my outfitters would be like, hey, don't even go out, go to this section and go at, say, 10:30 and get a later start. And then you pretty much hit the gap between the main boats that are going that day, and you can almost get a lot more to yourself. Instead of 30 boats at one launch, you launch a little later in the next section, and then you're kind of in the gap between them, and that works out pretty good.
That makes sense. Yeah, right in the gap. Yeah, last year's hoppers were insane, right? 1 in 10-year hopper hatch.
So crazy.
It was crazy.
So stupid.
It was.
I mean, we truthfully, a lot of those guys know how to fish the middle, right? And we never really fish the middle. It sounds dumb, but I'm just like standing in the front of the boat, just whipping my hopper around, just being really stupid. And I catch like a 20-inch fish in the middle of the river. So we're like, well, hey, this is interesting. Let's try the middle. We caught like 50 fish that day, just going straight down the middle of the river. I mean, like, it was insanity. A fish puking up hoppers. There was one who was puking up a hopper who had a pink thunder thighs in his mouth.
Oh my gosh.
The fly was left in his mouth still. And it was just, they were literally just putting on the feed bag. It was like they were ready for hibernation or something. It was just insane.
Just predators, right?
Yeah.
They just know they're there. Yeah. I don't have as much fun fishing the middle of the river, but there sure are a lot of fish that sit out there. I like reading the middle of the river when I can really read it, when the depth's right, and then I make sense of it, and then I catch a fish. Then it's fun. Yeah. But I hate the random ones where, it's just in the middle floating down. My dad wasn't rowing, and I caught one in the middle or whatever the case is, But
yeah, totally. Like when the middle is just like a monotone, or there's just nothing in the middle. You have no idea what you're doing, and you catch one. It's not, wasn't maybe as much skill involved there, but it's still, crazy that fish sit out in that water with basically no break. They're just hiding behind a rock that they can find. But
yep. I've been Well, we talked about it before the podcast, but I've been just crazy with streamers, and I've always fished them out of the boat and things. But I'm almost looking at rivers different, and definitely looking at the Madison different, where some of that middle water in there, like I can get in and swing that now with my spay rod and swing it, and then take a step down and swing it and take a step down, and so it's swinging all the way across that run, and nobody's really hitting that water or hitting it like that. Man, I've been picking up some good fish this spring. It's taken a long time to learn like the angles and diving it down, and then sometimes it's a swing and sometimes it's a strip pop, but just trying to get that fly down in those big holes, I've been doing really well.
Yeah, I've never actually done much with the spay. I've always wanted to get into it, but never really pursued it that hard. But I mean, there's a ton of fish that sit in the middle of the river, and that would make perfect sense. Getting out in the middle, most of the time you're stripping off the bank out of the boat. But I've heard that the few guys that do have started to use those spay rods around here, that they catch some nice fish.
Man, the spay rods are fun. Like, I got hooked on them fishing steelhead, and starting to go over to those close spots to us, like the Clearwater and the salmon and places like that. And a single hand rod, you just couldn't reach, but the double hand rod, you were so much more effective and you could reach further. And so I started nymphing with the spay rods is how I started, and then after you get some nymphing, it's like, man, it'd be really cool to swing one up, and so then you start swinging, and then I come from the Olympic Peninsula, so getting like rehooked back on steelhead. What happened was, I grew up in the Olympic Peninsula. Steelhead are the fish of 1,000 casts. They're really tough to catch. And I went out with my buddies, but very rarely would I tie into one. The runs aren't what they used to be. They're really tough to catch. Then I moved to Montana for 20 years and built all this skill learning the rivers and depths and how to fish different ways. And then you kind of go back when you're dialed in, and now we can go to the Olympic Peninsula. I think I hooked like 11 in 7 days this year, just chrome bright, straight from the ocean, coastal rainforest, and those rivers out there, man, they're wild. Like, they're glacial fed out of those mountains, and they get 200 inches of rain a year. So there's just ferns, and it looks like an enchanted forest or something, like out of the Lord of the Rings or something. And you fish, and then the fish are so hard fighting, so chrome, but the only way to catch them is with those spay rods. But we fish them nymphing out of the boat, out of rafts, and you have to go through like class 4 whitewater at times, and there can be an old growth tree across the river. You might have to portage your raft, and all of the put-ins and takeouts get blown out, so you're dumping your boat off the highway somewhere or off a gravel bar. Super cool down there. But that's what got me hooked on spay rods, and then swinging, and then bringing it for trout around here, like just starting to think about this river differently and getting that depth and the right sink tip on it. Super effective, but it's a really fun cast. You get hooked on the cast, and it's no power or muscle. It's just all smooth and done with line loading on the water, and everything's smooth, and then it'll just huck that thing across the river. It's killer.
Oh, it looks so awesome.
Yeah, you see some guys doing the spay. Like, we're at the Missouri. There's a lot more spay on the Missouri.
Yes.
Like, that's a big deal. They have spay clinics. Headhunters got that whole clinic thing they do like every week, or I don't know. But yeah, it looks very interesting. I've casted a few spay rods a little bit. A buddy of ours that used to be a friend taught me how to spay cast, but I never did it again. But I think you got to sometimes push yourself to try something new, and when you get stuck in your ways, just the regular way to fish out here, you don't want to try something new,
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, and that single hand weighted line streamer fishing is really effective. It's like, for each piece of water, it almost takes a different tool. And so sometimes I'm sliding the single hand out of the boat, and then sometimes I'm taking the double hand out of the boat. So, like, just having all those tools in your toolbox is pretty fun. But we'll have to go out and fish going down, and then we'll stop and we'll work a couple runs. Like, I stopped at the bridge hole, the old bridge piling hole down to, like, Valley Garden the other day.
Yep.
And swung like 3 really good fish up in 4 casts right in that thing. It was
Really?
pretty killer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fun.
yeah, we've gotten so used to taking like a dry fly rod. It just gets expensive, but a dry fly rod, a nymph rod, and a streamer rod, And you can hit a hole, you could do all three and figure out what's going on for the day, or some parts of the river it's totally different,
It's just the way it's got to be, right?
Yeah.
It's like you got to have all those rods set up and in your boat, because if you don't, by the time you change over to the dry fly, when you see them rising, the hatch is over and you go, oh, God
Yeah.
dang it,
Yeah.
If I just would have had a dry fly rod, or usually what happens is you start seeing them rise and it's like, oh, I'll throw my nymph in there and you just blow up the whole hole, and you could have probably picked 4 or 5 fish out of that pot if you just would have had a dry fly. So I'm the same way, man. I have all those rods rigged up in my boat ready to rock and roll.
Or like when there's a fish rising, or like it's like late spring, like it is kind of now, and the water's green, and you got like the biggest nymph rig in the world on, like a giant rubber legs and something below it, a huge wire worm. I mean, that's not purist, but you just slap it in
Catches
there,
fish.
and it just blows. It just blows everything up, and you see a riser like right before that. You're like, well, there's going to be nothing left in here basically after this hits the water. So.
It's so true, right?
Yeah.
So true. Yeah, those worms, they'll catch fish. Boy, those things. There's just some patterns. Like, I've got like a pattern for each dry fly or whatever, and sometimes I'll play around. And then my nymphs, I pretty much just have like about 10 of them that I run. And same thing with streamers. Like, I've been through all the streamers, and I probably tried 50 different patterns. But I kind of settle on 2 or 3 patterns in 3 different colors. Do you guys find that as well?
Oh yeah, I've only fished one streamer in one color for probably the past year and a half, and it works every time I fish it. And it's like,
Is it olive or olive and white?
olive, just straight olive?
Olive is so good for
it's
the
my
Maddie,
favorite.
isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean,
Good
you
for you.
really don't need, as far as nymphs go, you can get away with probably 5 nymphs year round. They're gonna work. I mean, as long as it's not just a dead day, that you can catch fish just about any time with them.
I mean, I've got a boat box with a leaf in it, with nymphs through the whole thing, and I use 10 nymphs.
Yeah.
And those days when it's terrible, I'm like, yeah, let's try this. And it never works.
It
Let's
never
try
works.
This. Let's try
It never
this.
works.
Terrible.
When it's terrible, it's just terrible at it. It doesn't matter, which bug you tie on.
No,
does
they
it?
just will not look at anything. It's the weirdest thing.
Will not eat. Yeah, they sure turn on and off, don't they? This river can sure kick
Oh.
your butt.
Super temperamental.
You know what? The dry flies, though, a little different sometimes. Like, I think the Madison, they're not as picky here. I think maybe just because there's more break in the water, but it seems like you can get away with just a certain dry fly here. Like the Missouri or Henry's Fork, the pickiness turns up way, I don't know, it's just way different at least there. Because you have to go through all the bugs and you finally find one. And maybe that's the one that always works there. But for us, it's so different up there. They're so picky. But on the Madison, it's just, you kind of just have your regulars. And
It's just
it
got to be
always works.
close, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've found, especially with the Madison, that it's more like presentation than your imitation. If you can get that perfect drift in the right spot, you can put 3 or 4 different flies, and they're going to eat all of them as long as you can get the right float.
Spot on, Clay. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's presentation is king over everything. And yeah, you can tell it. You watch somebody that's really good in the front of your boat, and there's some guys, I mean, you guys are really fishy, I think I'm pretty fishy, but boy, you get some guys in the front of the boat, they're just like a magician with that
Oh, yeah.
rod.
Yeah, that's freaky weird sometimes. Like, they're just catching fish where I'm like, I've never seen a fish come out of there before. You're like,
Pulling 'em out
what?
everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy too. These guys that fish this river a bunch, they get really good lines going down the river, and the river's never the same. You kind of have your spots you like and things, but it's strange. It's like every day going down that river is different. Like, you just don't get bored of it. I think I could fish the Madison every single day. I wouldn't get bored of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we've done Varney to town so many times.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That float is like, man, I know probably where all the fish are sometimes, and then some days it's just so bad. You're like, why do we fish Varney to town? But there's so many good sections. There's 50 miles of it too. It's like sometimes maybe don't do Varney to town every time you want to go. So,
It's the home stretch, I
Yeah.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
so like I'm always on that stretch too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes when they're not eating, it can be tough because you're throwing it in the right spots.
Yeah, or like early spring when there's like no water in there. That can be really tough too. If like the weather changes and it's cold, or like super high sun is just terrible. Like, you can't even find a fish in the whole section. But the day it's cloudy and there's a little extra water, it's like, hey, you catch like 50 fish in this section. Where'd they all come from?
Oh, I know. When it turns on,
Yeah.
there's more fish and more big fish in this river than you realize too. Like, you realize that when you fish the salmon fly hatch really hard. And
Yeah.
I've been fishing this river for a year, I've been fishing it for 10 years, but you fish it all year long, and you really work hard to see those 20 to 22-inch fish, and you see them quite a bit here and there. And then the salmon fly hatch comes, and you might catch 4 that go 23 in one little section. It's just crazy, the big fish that come out to eat during that hatch.
Oh, yeah. That's one thing. I've really dived into the streamer game these last couple of years, and it's like there are a lot of big fish in here. And, there's a crap ton of the cookie cutter 15, 16 inchers, but if you really start targeting a little more like those big dry fly days, it'll scare you how many big fish are in this river. It's healthy for sure.
Yeah, or like, I don't know, some of those days in the fall, we don't fish. I don't get to fish the fall very much because it seems to be really busy, but or you throw a streamer out and you can see it, like a white streamer, so you can really tell what's going on, and you see some chases that are like, whoa, that thing looks like a muskie out there, and like you don't realize that there's fish way bigger than you probably ever caught before that just realize that that's fake, or that the imitation was a little wrong, or they see the boat or something, but they're way smarter than we give them credit for,
They sure are. Well, especially in such a high-pressure river.
Yeah.
They don't like to get stuck and brought to the boat and into the net. They learn pretty quick what's real and what isn't.
Oh, yeah.
And the older that fish gets, the wiser it gets. And then those older fish, they just don't eat those little hatches, or I'm sure they've seen every rubber leg pass by them. They're just not going to eat one of those things anymore. Now, maybe if the conditions are right and there's a bunch of, nymphs coming down or whatever. But for the most part, they just know better.
Yeah, you really have to get specific and target if you want to go for the big ones. People get lucky every day. They can fool them every once in a while, but for the most part, those suckers are smart.
Well, it's with the, like there'll be a caddis hatch or something, bunch of little fish up and moving, and you'll see one rise that's a lot different than the others. You're like, what is that? And you catch the little fish first, so you never figure out if that was a giant fish or not. But every once in a while, you see a rise that just doesn't look right, And those rises the little fish make are normally way bigger, and those big fish just grab the top of the surface and move down. And you can kind of tell in a pot of fish, like, whoa, that's a lot bigger in the back. But you never really catch those fish with the dry either sometimes.
Right, with the smaller dries, right? Not very often. You'll catch a 20-incher or something, but those bigger next-level fish, hardly ever. I'm sure they eat them. Like the best dry fly hatch I got on this year, I had my streamer rod and a weighted line, and came up and they were eating blue-winged olive, and it was all like these giant painted-up browns that were just eating right in front of me, and I couldn't make it back to my dry fly line in my truck to make it back to catch them, so I just sat there and watched them until I finally had to throw my streamer at them, and see them, and hooked a really nice fish out of there too. But yeah, gosh, they just don't eat those dry flies like that, those big fish. But those are when you fish the river a bunch, it seems like you progress to like wanting to see and hunt those bigger trout. They're just different. Like fishing and action is always fun, but when you hook one of those big fish and then you see it roll and it's a big fish, you just want to touch it so bad. You want to land it. And those browns, man, those things, once they get big like that, they got a lot of fight in them. Big browns and big rainbows.
Yeah.
But I love catching those next level fish. It's just a dose of adrenaline like that you don't get off the normal fish or the average fish.
We were doing Varney to town. I don't really remember. It was closer to 8 Mile, but Clay hooked a fish like 5 feet from the boat. The biggest fish I'd ever seen. And did it break your
Yeah.
He set the hook and it was it's bigger than my oar, and I'm like, oh my god, and I'm going freaking out in the seat. And that's crazy because you can't believe that fish came out of like a foot of water. How could I not see that fish? You know what I mean, it just blows your mind.
Wild. You got a pretty good one the other day, right, Clay?
Yeah, not too bad. That was pretty awesome. We were up at below Hepkin Dam up there, and there's some nice fish in there, but
really nice.
And Culley actually wasn't with me. I was with another buddy. He couldn't come.
Yeah.
But we were up there fishing, and it just started nuking snow. And my buddy's, he's not really as hardcore as we are, but he still likes to go. And he's sitting there with his hands in his pockets. And I was like, are you going to fish that run? And he's like, no. So I put the streamer on, went up there, and about 6 casts pulled that guy out. And my day was made. I left. I just went home.
Well, in that spot, too, if that kid would have known, when we were in that same run last year, I hooked probably 4 or 5 fish over 20 inches, probably over 24 inches.
Wow.
But I couldn't keep them on. And Clay sat there and watched me. And I'd throw it out, nymph out there, and it'd go down, and I'd set, and you could see this giant boil, and it was probably the same fish eating it over and over again, but I could never hook him. So every time since we go back up there, we know exactly that run probably has something ginormous in it, and we always go back to it, and he didn't know that, but that's a pretty cool run.
My biggest brown trout came from up there in that stretch.
Yeah,
off a
same.
salmon fly. God, just crazy. Yeah.
Well, that salmon fly hatch up there is so late too.
Yeah.
People forget about it down here. It's still going on up there.
Man, it
but
was crazy. I waded across the river and fished down and threw it in a run, and I saw a giant red flash. And you know how you just see a big flash, and I wasn't sure how big, but it looked big. So, I sat there on the bank, and I waited my 10 minutes. Usually you don't do that. Usually you miss a fish and throw it right back in. Oh, he didn't eat. But I thought, oh, that was a good fish. I'm just going to sit here. And so I just sat and held my fly. I just looked at the run
Takes
and
a lot
just
of
sat there.
restraint.
Doesn't it? Yeah,
Discipline,
it doesn't happen very often with me,
No.
but every once in a while. And so, gave it 10 minutes, and I threw it right back off the same bank, mended my line, and came right down through. And this giant brown trout came up and ate it and hooked him and fought him down through there and got him in. No camera, no nothing. He was 28. I was like, oh, man, I thought about bringing him home. It was like an alligator as he was wrestling around with me. But I had nothing. It was just just taking the moment. Just caught him on a dry fly. I'm not going to conk him on the head and go get,
no,
man,
you can't do that.
set him back in the river, set him free and let him back in and set him free and just sat there oh my God, like you say, day made. It's just that's like killing a big bull. You catch a big brown like that.
Oh, yeah.
You're just shaking there. And I threw it back in that same run and hooked a 26-inch rainbow the next cast. Fought that thing. I think it fought harder than the brown. So, that brown and that rainbow back-to-back was just, unreal. I think they came up
crazy.
from that lake feeding on those salmon flies in through there. But
they probably controlled that run too. Any little fish in there was like, holy moly. But
yeah, getting eaten, right?
well, there's so many, people can say, oh, you're publicizing that section, but everyone knows there's big fish in there. And
Yep.
a lot of people fish there. But there are some crazy fish in there. I hooked one day that literally, I don't even know, Clay, where that was, but it
was down closer to the mouth, where you were closer.
Yep.
Those big ones come
it
out
just
of the lake
haunts
and feed.
it haunts you. It broke. It didn't break my rod. There was a fracture in it already, but it was so big I couldn't move it, and it wasn't tail hooked because you could just tell it was just commanding where it wanted to go. It's you wish you could just at least seen it. It's how big was that? But
the big ones, you can't control their head. You don't control where they go. They control where you go.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And I think in there, there's a lot of lake fish that just cruise in and out and go up and
think you're
feed.
right.
And those, a lake fish compared to a river fish is substantially bigger. Fatter too, even if they're the same length. And
Well, that day, Clay, we were up there in May. It was snowing. It was terrible. But I had my box open, and he caught this ginormous brown, right? And you just don't see maybe it's like the girth in the main river stem that is up there. They just seem way fatter, and that probably is because they're just moving in and out of the lake. But yeah, that's just crazy up there.
Man, yeah, I love that place. Yep, and it fishes good all seasons, and like
All
you
the
say, the
time.
whole summer it's packed down there.
Yeah.
But there's just big fish that move in and out of there. It's a good place to spend some time when you're hunting for big ones and wade fishing only.
Yep.
I do see way more boats go down that thing than I used to. Do you guys ever take your boat down it?
Yeah.
we won't take it down it, but we'll float across to that other side. That it's pretty tricky to wade to the other side of the river.
We've done
in
some
there.
pretty stupid stuff. to
Me
get
too.
across.
Me too.
Clay had an inner tube with a rope on it. Was on both ends. So Clay runs across. Because if you kind of run downstream.
Keep your legs moving.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
fall.
you just stay upright and
Yeah,
let
yeah.
the river take you.
He makes it. So he's like, all right, I'm going to go. We had another buddy with, but I take my Gore-Tex jacket on, zip it down over my waders. And I think did we have a life vest?
No.
Oh, yeah.
No life vest.
And I'm in the inner tube with my backpack and rod, and Clay's just pulling me across, and you get across, and you can't really hold you. So you just kind of hop out and hope you make it out of the bank. But,
Isn't that killer? It's just the world is so nerfed and so safe. There's so many rules, but when you're out in nature, whether you're fishing or you're hunting, you're responsible for your own safety and your own decisions. and you get to come up with harebrained shit like that. Like, it's great, It's like
That's one of the best memories.
Like,
I
it
have.
reminds me, like, I'll hunt bears down in the canyon, which is such a long hike, and then, you got to run all the way down and then raft across, and raft is the new thing. I used to take an inner tube, and then I'd take a rain jacket and one paddle like a Navy SEAL and try to get across that thing.
Basically what we were doing.
Oh, my God. I did that one time, and I was so out of breath, and I'm a runner, but I don't think I had a paddle. I think I was trying to doggy paddle that thing across before I went down the kitchen sink, and oh, my God, I was just absolutely exhausted going through that thing, but yeah, some of the stuff that you come up with is pretty fun.
Oh yeah, like they took a kayak once, and they didn't understand that you can't just run up on the bank, so they hit the bank.
Not much of a kayak.
And the kayak starts going back down the other way. Like, no! But yeah, that's some crazy stuff. I mean, with boats too. I mean, yeah, it's just you can do anything you want.
Should we tell them about the snowmobile or keep that one locked down?
Oh, we could tell people about that. Because we went in there early once with a raft and crossed, but we took a snowmobile and hauled the raft
the road
down
was still
the
blown
road.
shut with snow.
So we went and got an old phaser and put it in the bed of the truck, and then we had the raft and we hauled it down in there.
Smart. Good for you guys.
Well, we hit the slide in, and Kelly looks out the window. And he's like, where are you guys going? He's like, yeah, that was crazy because the snow had melted pretty heavy on the way back out. It was still deep, but the road had melted. We didn't want to drag the raft on the road. It's like a brand new raft. So we put the raft in the river. You know where the road up there is really close to the river?
Uh-huh.
So the raft's in the river, snowmobile's on the road, and we're pulling it up the road like that.
But that's what it takes, right?
Yeah.
A creative mindset. Like, that gets you into fish. Well, and it's just like this killer adventure that you guys get to share together,
Totally.
too. It's so fun.
Yeah, it's just people who, like, get their ideas locked in a box. It's like,
I love it.
It's so much fun.
I mean, compared to, like, hunting almost, to kill big animals, it ups your odds if you go out of the box and get, way back country or way up high or whatever, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like you can escape some people and find some really nice fish if you're willing to get a little risky and get some crazy ideas and go try new things. And
yeah, you're spot on. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's it.
Yeah.
Thinking creatively like that. Well, and even, these drift boats and these rivers, like exploring all these rivers, like you got to have a pretty wild hair just to be taking your drift boat down with your buddies, especially new sections, and you don't know where the takeout is. I mean, half the time your shuttle doesn't show up. Like, you never know what you're in for in a day of fishing.
This story about the big hole, we went to the fly shop, the Sunrise Fly Shop in Melrose.
Yep.
Yeah, they were nice, but full day float. We've done 2 of these crazy ones in the big hole, but we didn't know the bridges were pretty low.
Full day at 4 in the afternoon.
We'll put in 4 p.m. It's full day.
That river can get dangerous too in high water.
It's sketchy.
Clay's standing in the front boat. I'm rowing. He's like, "You better row faster, forward." Because we hit a wave, and he's 6'3". It hit him as like his chest. I'm like, "Oh my God, we better do something else here." But
I saw somebody come down the conversion right there, the old dam that they knocked out, and flip their raft right there.
Really?
Yeah, in the wave train, just flipped their raft in the middle in there. Had to go save them out there.
Yeah, we've never done that one. We've just done the canyon to Melrose or whatever. But
yeah, the canyon, Maiden Rock, all that stuff, man. That is just an awesome river, isn't it? But it's dangerous. It's a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law about sank my boat on it, where we got down through the canyon in there and got into one of those windstorms where it was like gusting 60 or 80.
It's crazy in there.
And it started blowing the boat all the way into the bank line, and he couldn't keep it straight. I actually shoved him out of the rower seat, got in the oars, and barely saved the boat as we just skimmed the bank line or whatever.
It's hard to beat the wind.
we about sank that boat in there. That's the closest one of the closest I've ever been.
Yeah, that river is western, and sometimes the fishing's terrible. Sometimes it's amazing, and it's true freestone. Like, the flows go from like 10 to 500. And you're like, how is it 10,500 even possible? But yeah,
well, I did some guiding over there last summer too. And one day I write down my shuttle where I'm going, and the guys at the shop call me, and like, I don't fish a ton over there, and they're like, "Oh, hey, this section's closed to guides today." I'm like, "Oh, well, that's great." So I moved my shuttle to the next section down, and I never floated it. And we're getting down pretty close to the end of the day, and I get down to this channel, and there's a log jam, and I got to like pull my boat back up the channel, and it's like, there's some crazy stuff that goes on over there.
You never know what you're in for. And some of those channels, you don't know which way to go going down. And I floated that section probably 100 times. I still forget which channel to go in.
That lower section's like all over the
and
place.
pretty soon you're just at this waterfall, and you're like, how in the heck am I going to get my boat down that thing?
So true.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The craziest river I think we've ever done is the South Fork of the Snake with 3 guys in a low side drift boat. And you look at that river and you're like, it's like 30 feet deep. And there's like jet boats going by, and the recircs are so ginormous. You're like, man, we are totally not in the right boat for this, you know? But
yeah, jet boat would go by, and the wake would like splash water into our boat,
we're like,
pumping
oh,
the bilge
God.
out.
God, I want to go do that river with my low side, though. That river looks like fun to
Oh,
fish.
it's amazing.
I got a pretty low side, and you can do it. I mean,
Okay.
But
Some of
it's-
the easier
as long
runs.
as
But
you're
yeah, little
well-skilled.
sketch.
Yeah.
I mean,
when you're first in it, it's like, oh, we're like on
being
a
in an
lake.
ocean in a
Yeah,
rowboat.
pretty
Clay is
much.
yelling at me. He's like, you got this freaking nice raft, and we took the boat, and here we are in the middle of this dang river. But, yeah, that river is nuts. It's so big.
Big,
It's like
big fish.
10,000 is low.
Man,
You know what
yeah,
I
it's
mean?
such a big river, but those big rivers hold big fish.
Big fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I fish that Missouri a lot, and I need to fish it even more. That Missouri
Yeah, we do
holds
too.
giants.
Do not get up there enough, but
Well, the whole inside-out technique up there kind of threw us for a loop. We're watching, like, we had no idea how to fish, and we're, like, watching people. It's like, man, we don't know what we're doing up here, but, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, those rivers are fun. That big hole too. Well, it's just fun to fish these other rivers. Like the Madison is our home river, so we fish it a lot. But it's so neat when you go to a different place like the Big Hole that just the color runs like Lipton's tea.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like
It's
iced tea,
colored,
exactly.
and then it's just all up in the brush and the grass. And some of the technical fishing you have to do under those trees, you're like it's not. You're not doing the professional cast up. You're side arming and you're skipping your bug in there, and then you're just trying to skate it in there before it gets locked into a stick jam down
Yeah,
below.
totally.
If you don't know what you're doing, you lose your whole box of flies in that place. But you have to gamble your flies in there.
Oh, yeah.
Like you just risk it, and you get in like this flow state when you're fishing it,
Yeah.
where you just start putting that fly in the right spots, and you're just tickling those branches with it, skating it by, may sink under, throw them in, back up, and man, when it's right, it's just right. It's just, and those big browns are eating in that place. That place is super special.
There's some
It's an awesome
huge
river.
fish in there, but, yeah. I don't think we've ever hit it on a really, truthfully good day. But, yeah, some of the pictures you see are like, whoa.
Oh, I've
whoa.
insane days on that
Yeah.
thing. The best days I've ever had on that river, and I usually time it pretty good. Usually my timing's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I go over to like fish that thing during the salmon fly hatch. I've been dying to get over there to throw streamers. Like tomorrow, streamers would be insane.
Yeah, their streamer game's good.
Yeah, their
I think their
streamers-
salmon flies are a little more consistent than ours are too. It seems.
Yeah,
like.
they get a big hatch.
Well, the day we went, we're like, yeah, let's drive over there. It froze. It was like 25 degrees, and we put the boat in. We're like, well, that's great.
No bugs.
The whole day, we can't even catch fish on nymphs today.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
totally.
I think the biggest thing was, like, for different rivers, when we went to the South Fork of the Snake and drove back to the Madison, we're like, this thing looks like a stream. Looks like a ditch compared to some, other rivers. That was the biggest thing for me when you start exploring. It's like the home river looks way different than anything else out there,
That's like those coastal rivers. Like some of those things are so giant. It's like you just look at your rod and look at the river. Like, what am I gonna do in this thing? But gosh, some of those things they just hold good fish. Once they're tougher to fish and tougher to read, but once you kind of figure them out, you can catch some real consistent and big fish in those things.
Oh yeah, totally. And I think people get so frustrated with the Madison sometimes too, because I have never seen a river like the Madison that's so shallow most of the time. Big Hole's got some super deep spots. Missouri's deep. South Fork is insanely deep, and here it's like you walk across the whole thing every time. Fall out of the boat, you just stand up, and people don't see holding water as well here.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I first moved here, like I really wanted to fly fish a bunch and came, and I would get my butt kicked on the Madison like crazy. I couldn't read the water. I couldn't figure it out. So I'd drive from over here to the Gallatin so I could go catch fish and then drive all the way back. Like I'm barely making any money, but I just couldn't. I couldn't figure that Madison out. It took me years to be better at reading it. But you're right. It's a technical river, and it's shallow, which makes it really good for dry flies. Like the fish just don't have to move far, and we have these big hatches all year long. And now, I love a thick caddis hatch, and I love brown drake, but it's like the salmon flies and the hoppers and some of the terrestrials. Dude, I saw the terrestrials last night. We're getting those red beetles that are coming off right now, and just crazy, covered the house. Last night was like the first night of it. I wonder if a guy made it down to the Madison there at night and caught those beetles.
Yeah.
Like, you don't think of terrestrials right now, but I think it would work. Like, there was 1,000 beetles outside my house last night.
Really?
Yeah.
It seems like almost sometimes like beetles and ants can produce better results than hoppers.
Yes.
Yeah, like little ants too.
They aren't fished very often.
They like ants, don't they?
They do.
They like flying ants, yeah.
Yep.
And those flying ants get super thick down there on the river. I've got into them, too, where they bite me. You guys ever got into the bite ones?
It's terrible.
God, they're
It's
horrible.
like a swarm of mosquitoes.
God, horrible.
Yeah, it's weird. You don't think of terrestrials this early, but I was riding the four-wheeler up the West Fork with no helmet on, and I took a hopper to the face. I'm like, already? Like,
Yeah,
like,
super
wow,
early. Yeah,
But-
super early.
I don't know if this year will be as good as last. I don't think we can even
I don't
expect
think
that.
so.
Oh, my gosh.
But-
I don't know what made it so good. Is it a dry and hot summer or a wet spring? Or I don't know
think it
what.
was-
I think it was just wet.
I think it was a
summer.
wet spring.
Okay.
Just a lot of grass.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what else it could be.
I've never seen hoppers blow in the water with me. Like, we're floating, and there's, like, naturals all over the place. Like, then you know it's good. Like, when you can spot naturals as a human, like, it's good. It's
Yeah,
like,
no
whoa.
doubt. Yeah, those windy days can almost be good on those hoppers, too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Blowing them in there.
Yeah, that year will, be in the history books for insane hopper hatch,
It will.
You know,
Yeah,
people
made first year guiding really nice.
Oh, good for you. All just single dry fly.
Where should I cast? Be like, doesn't matter. Throw it anywhere. It was awesome.
I think last year we had good water, and it was hot, but it rained enough even in the summer that it wasn't like the whole place was on fire.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Some of those years you get into August, it's like, whoa, man, we should like not even fish maybe. Like, it's
Oh,
so
you're
hot
so
out,
right. Yeah, it does get so hot. Yeah, I hate those summers like that. And you never know what you're going to get in Montana either.
No.
Yeah, and sure dictates a lot of the river conditions, but our fish tend to stay pretty healthy. I mean, sometimes late summer they get a little warm where you don't want to put any more wear and tear, but for the most part, our fish stay pretty healthy. Like, there's some systems where, like, ethical fishermen don't even fish them into late summer just because it puts so much stress on them.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rivers like that.
There's a couple rivers that could probably use the hoot owl that don't have it, but the Madison's pretty good. It stays pretty cool.
Well, I think now that the dam is bottom letting, which will make a big difference. It had bottom let last year. That even maybe why the fishing was even better last year for dry flies.
Bottomlet, is that like out of the lake, are you
Yeah,
talking?
so Hebgen was top letting for years. So
Okay.
their spillway was letting water over the top, not their bottom let, which was their hole in the bottom of the dam. So the temperature was like 10 degrees difference.
Wow.
So they were letting stuff out of the bottom of the lake at like, I don't even know, it's like probably in the 60s or even like high 50s in late summer. Well, it was coming off the top at 72 in July.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
That was
could have
for
made
years.
a huge difference.
Yeah.
Well, and I know they really got their system dialed as far as pulsing cold water down through the system, which could screw up your day of fishing,
Yeah.
but at least it cooled down the river.
Totally. But I think that was a big deal. I think
Yeah.
that changed the whole bug setup, the whole ematology setup of the whole river, because it was hot forever, and now it's pumping straight cold for as long as that doesn't break again. But
Man, that's
Yeah.
really cool. I didn't even think about that, but you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that water's got to be so much colder, so much better for those fish coming down through there.
well, you also think too, like quake is in the way there, and I wonder how much if you didn't have quake, obviously we're not going to get rid of quake, but I mean that must heat the water up too in the middle. Because when it's coming out of the dam, it's cold at the bottom. But that quake must be like a little heating element because it just sits there for a while. But
Yep.
then it gets to flow out again. But
Yep. They say that quake is going down, that eventually it'll be gone.
I would think it would erode out eventually.
well, it should just eat it should just eat the mouth of itself right out, right?
Mhm.
But
Yep.
yeah, that's crazy looking down there. You can look down. Like one day I was like, we should float that. And I went and looked out. I'm like, no, we should not. So I was
It's like class 5 in there.
Yeah, that's gnarly. You are
Yeah.
not getting a boat down through there, are you?
I mean, there's stuff. It's probably doable for the first like half mile. Then the
Mhm.
middle section drops so much. I don't even think you're floating. It's like half waterfallish. Just kind of like you'd be like skipping it all the way down. But yeah, that's crazy in there. So
It's so fun when you catch these different sections of the river. Like that section up there, like you may not get it good and ever catch a fish out of there for 5 years, but then that one day you show up and those salmon flies are buzzing everywhere and you're like, man, it looks pretty good out. And you throw it out there and that first 22 eats it and you're like, oh my God, it's fire.
Yeah.
But I've caught it like every different section of the Madison. And once you get it good in one section, you're just always trying to reproduce it and hit it right the next year. And it's so tough. I end up finding it in a different section or something. But isn't that wild how like your timing when you really get it right on a section, how many fish are in there?
Oh yeah, and that's, I think, especially with the big bugs, salmon flies and even hoppers, that it's so hard to time those sections right. And they could be in one part of the river one day, and the main hatch will be 5 miles farther up the river the next day, and you're just like way off trying to time it. But
well, I think people too shortchange themselves. I do this all the time by trying to go back to the same spot and recreating it when you could probably just keep going somewhere else and recreate it somewhere else, with a different experience. Because you just kind of almost, I don't know, you kind of
Chase the dragon.
well, you shortchange yourself, because maybe if you tried something new that day, you'd recreate it again somewhere else. But yeah, you just get stuck. Like there's a hole we go to sometimes. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna catch fish out of this again. Never have ever. Like I caught like a 24 out of it. Like yeah, keep going back to it. You never catch anything. But,
I know some of those sections, like even where the river kisses the highway there, before you get to $3 up there. God, I caught that salmon fly hatch in there one year, so good. And I've caught a lot of fish in there, but this day was insane where I caught them all the way up that rock bank and then off the grass banks up there, and I just landed some insane fish. And never again. You just never see it like that again. It's just like the more you try. Yeah, like you say, you're almost better off if you just read the conditions and try to find where it's at that day and don't try to recreate it.
It just like there's been some streamer days where like you go in like, wow, that was amazing. Let's try to time that again with a thunderstorm in the evening. We'll go to the same spot again. You like 3 days in a row, you don't catch anything. You're like, well, are we dumb or what happened? Like you just
so tough to reproduce, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and we got this into this habit of like, okay, let's watch the radar. So before a thunderstorm comes, let's fish ahead of the storm and see if you can catch one of those big fish ahead of time. Well, that works sometimes, but most of the time it never works. But one day we got hooked on it because Clay caught this giant fish and the storm was right there, and you think, oh, the pressure's dropping and they're going to eat before the storm.
Oh, we got it figured out.
Yeah, exactly. Light bulb. Yeah.
That's so funny. But it's fun theorizing, and you do figure some stuff out throughout the years, don't you? You get better and better, and it's something that you never stop improving and never stop learning. I think that's why I love it.
Well,
you're never gonna figure a trout out. Never. And the river changes every day. That's one thing I've seen from guiding last year is, I'd be on the river for 5 days in a row, and it is literally different every day. And it's just, you never really know quite what to do. You got to figure it out, and no one ever figures it out. But it's just a lifelong challenge.
When I first moved here, below Story Ditch, there's a hole. I caught a fish there once. I'm like, I'll keep going back. I went back a couple of days, kept catching fish, and then I couldn't catch fish there anymore. And it's how it gives you just enough to have fun, and then it just makes you become so humble because like everything you just learned doesn't work anymore for the next 2 weeks. And you're like, well, I have to learn something new now. And it humbles you immediately. It's amazing.
Oh, it does. And you can wear a spot out too. Like when you're fishing a bunch, you'll do a section and you'll get them really good, and you're like, God, I got them good yesterday. I'm going right back in there. Well, you caught all the fish that were looking to eat your stuff. You go back down through there, and then you get your butt kicked, and you're like, okay, time to go to a different section. I guess I got to give it a week or 2 weeks or whatever. It is. Fly fishing is so humbling, but so fun. There's just no better way to spend the day, is there?
Well, no, not at all. I mean, it's an amazing experience. And you think you got, you get all this gear and everything, but sometimes I caught just as many fish when I didn't have a clue what I was doing the first time, and it just that's the fun part about going out each day. You never know what's going to happen. So
yeah, sometimes the more you know, the worse off you are. Like the more you theorize and the more you think about it, second guess yourself, the worse off you are. I was like, man, I did better when I didn't know anything, and I just tossed that thing out there. But
totally,
it's just the game we
start
play.
overthinking and second guessing, and it's nice when you haven't been out there for like a month and you go out there and you just go bone basics because you have no idea what's going on, and then you have a great day and you're like, oh, hey, that worked.
Yep. Yeah, it's always smart to adapt to the conditions you're given. Try to figure out what those fish are doing that day. And it seems like you can, like, there's a pattern to the river, isn't there? And so, like, you start going down and you start finding fish all on the front of the rocks, or you start finding fish on the side of the rocks, or wherever you start finding them, like, you start dialing into it. Like, you start seeing that pattern and throwing that fly in that same spot, and they just keep eating it in that spot, and it's like, oh, I got it. I solved the pattern today, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, I think, too, with, like, I don't know how to say it. Like, I get so complacent, too. Like, I get a set of flies at work, and I just keep fishing them. Well, then it just starts to fade off, right? But I'm like, oh, this works. You just keep fighting it all day long, and that shouldn't be the way you do it sometimes. Sometimes it works, it helps, but most of the time you should change a lot and keep trying different places while you're on the boat each day, because when you get complacent, it just sucks. It just gets terrible sometimes.
It does. It gets complacent.
What's up,
Come here,
buddy?
bud.
Hey there.
Yeah, Gunny came down to say hi to you guys. But
Hi.
yeah, it sure is a fun endeavor. I sure am glad that I found it and you guys have found it. Man, I've just been so impressed with your social media. It's so good to meet you guys in person and have you on the podcast.
Yeah,
Super fun for
me.
me.
Yeah, we
Come
did.
here, bud.
I'd always seen your stuff and how good at hunting you were, or I think the first thing I remember ever seeing yours was it was like January 20th, and you were fishing a streamer at Varney, and you caught this big brown. I'm like, no freaking
on the
way.
white?
No freaking way. I've been fishing
Like,
all
who
day.
is this
Who is
guy?
this guy? There's no way he got that. No way. But
Yeah, same thing. I'm super pumped to be on here. I listened to all your hunting ones and everything, and you get it done for sure. And like, I've always known who you were, but I never met you and knew you were in town. But
It's so cool to connect with you guys.
Yeah, that's cool.
Now we got to do a day on the river. Head over to that big hole and get it right.
Definitely.
It's
You
getting
gotta
ready
show
to
us
turn
some
on.
stuff.
Salmon
there.
flies are coming up.
Yeah.
We've done some really dumb stuff on that river. And like some days it was so bad, we're like, we're just gonna go hit waves. Like but
Sometimes you just got to try something new,
yeah,
right?
totally.
Well, thanks. And Clay, you're guide now. Where can guys get a hold of you? Book a trip.
So it's kind of sort of a tricky deal. So legally, I have to work under an outfitter, and so technically they have to book with the outfitter, and then like if they want to guide with me, then they'd book through the outfitter, and then like request me for the trip. But basically, Discover Montana Outfitting.
Dirty Mike.
Yep.
He's a good fly fisherman. I'm going to get him on the podcast, too.
He's a good dude.
Yeah,
And
he
he's
is a
been-
good dude.
He's been really good to me. He really, really helped me with connecting with a bunch of different outfitters last year and helped me get my start. So I'm glad for that.
Isn't that so nice, too, when guys lend a helping hand? When they don't have to, and they just, like, they like you, and they want to help you out and want to help you make those connections. That's so cool.
Yeah, I'm super grateful for it. He really put me in the right direction.
Yeah.
Okay, Discover Montana Outfitting. Request Clay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Well, just super cool to meet you guys. Again, your guys' Instagram page.
Skyblasters. So
Yeah.
Instagram's the biggest place to find us. We have a website too, but Instagram's kind of where all the content ends up. So dabbled in a little YouTube stuff, but photos seem to be the best for us at least. So it's Instagram.
I'm pushing for the YouTube, but it's going to take off eventually.
Yeah, good for you guys. Well, I got to start putting some vids together too. Like, it's just good content,
Yeah.
and we get to see some of the coolest stuff out there if we could just capture it. The problem is that you got to have a camera in your hands and not a rod in your hand. And with us three, that's going to be a problem,
Yeah,
right?
so
It's
true.
But you're right. If you could capture some of the stuff we see out there and some of the excitement, there's some guys that are doing a really good job, and I need to do the same. I need to get a guy down here that can run a camera or capture some content. But we got to get out, guys.
Yeah,
Definitely.
do.
Yep. Culley, Clay, really nice to have you on the
Yes,
podcast. Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate
you.
it.
All right, guys, it's a wrap. What I tell you, those guys had such great insight into fly fishing. They just spend so much time doing it, so much time on the water, and they absolutely love it. So fun to get both those guys together for a podcast. I'm going to get out fishing with those guys this summer, so I got to give them a shout here and get out for salmon flies or hoppers or something fun. Man, it's just so great. Montana summers right now, so many different rivers to fish. I've got my home river here and salmon flies going off, but also been fishing some different streams that are less pressured, less sought after. Gosh, there can just be some really nice browns sitting in them. So I'm having fun exploring Montana as well this summer. in the little bit of free time I have. It's tough with everything construction and everything I have going on, but definitely squeaking in a few days here and there, and that's what's important. It's just no funner time than being on the river. Like I say, I had a great time with Dylan. He came up, fished for a couple days, and we caught the hatch pretty good. Had a good evening float. We turned some, but we were a little bit low on the hatch. Made an adjustment, and then the next day we got into them good. So that's a riot. And I know those bugs are getting in that weight-only section, which I do really good on. There can just be some giant fish in there. And so I'm going to try to get my work done here and get this podcast taken care of. I got to do a Western Hunting Summit coming up this weekend on Thursday. So I've got a couple days here to kind of get out and fish some evenings before I got to go to that summit. But yeah, it's just a great time to be out. Great hatches. These rivers are flowing good. It's just so much fun to be out. So I'm really enjoying my time on the water. Thanks a bunch, you guys, for the support of this podcast. You guys are the reason why this podcast survives. The downloads, the shares, the reviews on wherever you listen to podcasts really help me out. So I just appreciate the support on this podcast and also Eastman's Elevated. And check out the podcast we have this week with Tyler Boschma on Eastman's Elevated. It's a great episode. The guy just has an adventurous spirit and is constantly all in. And so he's got a big sheep hunt coming up this year. We talk about backcountry nutrition and a bunch of great topics in there. So make sure to check that out. And with that, try to get out fly fishing this week, and check in with you next week.